proceed?
You may.
Your Honor, opposing counsel, may it please the court. On the morning of Saturday, September 22nd, 2012, Detectives Sam O'Leary and Alex Jones were assigned to investigate a fire that occurred in the maintenance building behind Phillips High School. Sheldon Brown, a janitor at Phillips High School, was tragically killed in this fire as a deliberate act of arson. Detective Jones and O'Leary received two separate anonymous tips indicating that defendant Dakota Allen and her friend Quinn Patel had information relating to the fire. Based upon these tips, the detectives went to the teenagers' homes that morning. Today, you will hear Detective O'Leary explain that he and his partner asked and obtained permission from both Dakota and Quinn's parents to question the teens to further their investigation. After permission was granted from the parents, the teens willingly went with the detectives to several locations relating to the investigation. Throughout the investigation, the defendant confessed twice to the events that caused the death of Sheldon Brown. Detective O'Leary will explain the first confession that was received, and Quinn Patel will testify as to the second confession that was made by the defendant. Both confessions were spontaneous and unprompted by police questioning. After the two confessions were made, Dakota was then placed under arrest and taken to the police station where felony arson and murder charges were filed. Detective O'Leary will explain that he properly Mirandized the defendant and received signed acknowledgement stating that the defendant understood his rights. While at the police station, the defendant recanted his confessions. The defendant has filed a motion to suppress in regards to his oral confessions. The defendant claims that his statements were obtained during a custodial interrogation, thus violating his privilege against self-incrimination and due process rights. We, the prosecution, bear the burden of proof, and through the preponderance of the evidence, we will prove that no custodial interrogation took place. Because this was not a custodial interrogation, and the police were not intending an arrest, the Miranda warning did not need to be given to the young adults before questioning took place. The defendant at no time was in custody until after his two confessions were voluntarily made. This is because there are two inquiries that determine whether an individual is in custody. The first part is the circumstances surrounding the investigation, and the second part is whether a reasonable person would have felt he or she was at liberty to terminate the investigation and leave. Today, the prosecution will validate that the circumstances surrounding this investigation did not constitute as police custody. The detectives and the teens went to public locations, including a fast food restaurant and other locations in their own town. The police were not wearing their uniforms, but rather department jackets, and did not have their standard police cruisers. Dakota was placed in the front seat of Detective O'Leary's car, and as Quinn will testify, later got in the back seat with her, so they were able to communicate throughout the day. Following their protocol, the police received permission from both sets of parents to question the teens. After hearing the facts presented in today's case, it will become evident that Dakota was at liberty to terminate the investigation and leave at any time. Both Dakota and Quinn had their cell phones on them all day and were informed by the detectives that they could call their parents or an attorney at any time and be picked up. Quinn will explain that she never felt like she was going to be arrested, as the police never accused the pair of committing a crime. And this is not the first time that Dakota has had encounters with the law enforcement. In this investigation, the police relied on their extensive training and experience, which collectively, their experience amounts to over 31 years. They followed and demonstrated the protocol that has been established. For the reasons stated, we, the plaintiff, respectfully request that the defendant's motion to suppress be denied and his statements be admitted. Thank you.
Thank you.
He had a horrible headache, and he couldn't get to bed until way past midnight. And he was awoken just several hours later at 7 a.m. with Sam O'Leary knocking at his door. And Sam O'Leary was the same detective that he knew from previous incidents, and his father told him to go with the police. At this point, he entered constructive custodial custody. After being placed in an unmarked police car, he was taken to many places that would cause him emotional distress. He was taken to a burning building where he still smelled the smoldering fire, and he was shown a picture of the family and the burned clothing and an outline of where the maintenance worker had once been. At this point, he finally started dry heaving. He was not taken home yet, though. Next, he was taken to the victim's house, and he was once again asked more questions. and he asked for his medication. But they didn't give it to him. They just laughed at him. Quinn then suggested that they go to the bathroom, but they didn't go there. Their next stop was at a church, which was connected to a cemetery. Began questioning them again. Finally, they were taken to a fast food restaurant, only to be escorted into the bathroom and then placed back into the confines of the car. At this point, Dakota gets sick and threw up. But he's not taken home. The detectives split the two boys up at this point. And all alone in the car, O'Leary grabs him by the shoulders and shakes him, telling him that if his mother were still alive,
Plaintiff's counsel, you may call your first witness.
Prosecution calls Detective Sam O'Leary to the stand. May I proceed?
You may.
Good morning, Detective. Please state your name and occupation for the court.
My name is Sam O'Leary, and I'm a police officer and a detective with assignments to the homicide unit.
How long have you been a police officer?
I've been a police officer for the past 20 years,
How long have you served as a detective?
and I've been a detective for the past 16 of those years.
How long have you been assigned to the homicide unit?
It's about 8 years ago that I was first assigned to this homicide unit.
Can you explain the training you have received for these positions?
Yes, I received extensive training in forensic investigations, including specialized training in crime scene investigation techniques as well as digital forensics. Also, recently I've completed the advanced interviewing for the Law Enforcement Investigators Training Program, and that was through the Federal Department of Homeland Security.
What experience do you have with investigations?
Throughout my 20 years of being a police officer, I've investigated hundreds of crimes, including crimes that involve gang activities.
Let's move on to today's case. Do you recall the morning of Saturday, September 22nd, 2012?
Yes, on that morning, my partner, which was Detective Alex Jones at the time, and I were assigned to investigate today's case.
And what did you know about this case prior to investigating?
I knew that there was a fire that occurred in the maintenance building, which is behind Phillips High School, and that the fire killed a janitor who worked there by the name of Sheldon Brown.
Were you presented any other information relating to the case that morning?
Yes, Alex and I were informed of two separate anonymous tips that we received that indicated that Dakota Allen and his friend Quinn Patel had information relating to the fire.
Did you know Dakota and his friend prior to this investigation?
Yes, I've actually dealt with Dakota and Quinn on several prior occasions relating to gang activity. Not exactly, we just walked around the maintenance building and informed the teens that the fire killed a janitor.
What happened after you drove past the victim's home?
When we drove past Sheldon's house, we noticed some of Sheldon's family members arriving at his house, and at this point we told the teens that it would be best for them if they told us the truth at this time.
What happened after you drove past the victim's church and cemetery?
Well, we just drove past the church, and then we proceeded to park across the street from the cemetery, where I continued to ask the teens clear, distinct questions, and then again encourage them to tell us the truth.
What did you observe in terms of the teens' actions at this point?
At this point, it seemed that Dakota still had useful information. I wasn't really sure about Quinn, however, I felt like she likely knew something.
Now let's talk about when you took the teens out to lunch. What happened first?
First, I volunteered to contact their parents.
What did you say to their parents?
I told their parents that the investigation was going well, and we were going to take Dakota and Quinn out to lunch. And I also informed them that, based upon what Alex and I knew and what we had heard at this point, we weren't going to charge Dakota or Quinn, therefore they weren't going to need attorneys at this point.
Were Dakota and Quinn allowed to speak to their parents?
Yes, the teens were told that at any time during the day they could speak to their parents or speak with an attorney.
So what did Dakota and Quinn say to their parents throughout the investigation?
Although they were told that they were allowed to speak to their parents or an attorney, neither Dakota nor Quinn asked to do so, so they said nothing.
What happened after you conversed with their parents?
After I talked to their parents, we got Dakota some lunch and left them in the back seat of our patrol car to eat their lunch and talk while Alex and I discussed the case.
What happened at the police station?
About an hour after I placed Dakota in the holding cell, Dakota's father showed up with an attorney and some sort of medication for Dakota.
What, if any, knowledge did you have about the defendant's medication usage?
Prior to when Dakota's father showed up, I had absolutely no idea that Dakota required any medication use. I was never informed. No one ever told me.
What happened while the defendant's father and the attorney were present at the station?
While they were present, Alex and I proceeded to interview his father and attorney were present.
During this interview, what happened?
Not surprisingly, Dakota recanted his two confessions that he made to me that day and went on to deny any involvement in or knowledge of the crime.
How did you conclude this investigation?
I wrote up the final report.
Thank you. No further questions at this time, Your Honor.
Thank you, defense. You may cross.
Thank you, Your Honor. May I proceed?
You may.
Thank you. Good morning, Detective O'Leary. Detective O'Leary, is it true that you have always been, quote, by the book?
Absolutely.
So you've never been in trouble for becoming physical with a suspect before?
I have once, and it was a really long time ago.
So you have became physical with a suspect before, correct?
Like I just said, it happened once. Yes.
So it's not true that you've always been by the book.
It is true that I've always been by the book.
But isn't it true that you also said you became physical, which earlier you stated is against
Objection,
the
Your Honor.
rules?
This has been asked and answered.
Response.
Your Honor, I'm asking if this becoming physical is by the book, not whether he was always by the book.
I think it's been established that you've become physical one time with someone else, so you can move along. Thank you. Objection sustained.
Yes, Your Honor.
Detective O'Leary, isn't it true that you took the defendant and Quinn Patel in custody between 7 a.m. and 8 a.m. on the 22nd?
We did not take them into custody.
But you began questioning them.
We asked them some questions. That's true.
And Dakota allegedly confessed around 3 p.m., correct?
That's true.
But his Miranda document was signed at 4:35, correct?
That was the only time in which it was actually appropriate to give Dakota his Miranda form.
When was Dakota arrested?
Dakota was arrested after his second confession, which was after 2 p.m.
Okay. And while you were at the fast food restaurant, you told the defendant, Mr. Allen, and Quinn Patel that a video containing footage of two suspects setting the maintenance building on fire had been recovered, correct?
I did tell them that, yes.
Was that statement the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I would say that it was an exaggeration of the truth.
Was there actually a video recovered?
We had recovered the hard drive, but we're not able to fully recover the video yet.
Okay, thank you. You stated you went to the cemetery. Was this directly involved with the arson?
We parked across the street from the cemetery, but the cemetery was not directly related to the fire.
Alright, and isn't it true that you also received recent training in interrogation techniques along with your interviewing training?
Yes, of course.
And isn't it because of these recent interrogation technique trainings that you've taken that you decided to increase the pressure with Dakota Allen?
I wouldn't say it was because of my training that I decided to increase the pressure, no.
Was it because of your subsequent interrogation policy changes?
I wouldn't say so either.
Your Honor, at this time I would like to proceed with the mock trial rules of impeachment. Detective O'Leary stated that it was not because of his interrogation technique training and policy changes, which is against his testimony. I have it right here if you would like to see it.
What I'd like you to do is approach the witness and have him read that particular section, refresh his recollection, and then ask him that question again, please.
Certainly. May I approach?
You may.
Please let the record show this is a clean and unmarked copy of the witness's deposition.
If I may, Your Honor, Alex Jones is not here to testify today, and this report does not go towards custody or coercion in this case.
I think it may go more towards bias, maybe untruthfulness, so I'm going to allow the question, so objections overruled. Go ahead.
Thank you. So isn't it true that you wanted Alex Jones to change his report?
Alex wrote the initial report, and I was really concerned with the tone and accuracy of the report because in the past, Alex has actually gotten in trouble with the department regarding tone and accuracy, so yes.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
Prosecution, any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. cross-examination, you were asked about your in-your-face approach to suspects. Can you explain why you use this technique?
As a police officer for 20 years, that's the way I've been trained to be.
And why did you continue this investigation?
I continued the investigation because it indicated that Dakota and Quinn had information, so we just wanted the truth.
When did the defendant confess for the first time?
The defendant confessed for the first time after 2 o'clock after they ate lunch while he was in my car.
And what question prompted the defendant's confession?
There was no questions that were being asked that prompted Dakota's first confession.
When did the defendant confess for the second time?
Later after his first confession, and because his father and Quinn's parents showed up, that was when Dakota confessed for the second time.
And what question prompted the defendant's second confession?
Again, no questions were being asked from the point where Dakota confessed for the first time to the point that Dakota confessed the second time, so there was no questions that prompted the second confession.
At what point did you actually continue to question Dakota?
In fact, the only contact I had with Dakota was after he confessed for the second time at the police station where we gave Dakota his rights.
Thank you. No further questions.
Good morning, Quinn Patel. Please state your name to the court.
Quinn Patel.
Do you go to school, Quinn?
Yeah, I'm a sophomore at Phillips High School.
Do you know Dakota Allen?
Yeah, Dakota and I met when we played soccer together in middle school. We became pretty good friends, and now I would say Dakota kind of looks up to me.
Were you informed that there was a fire at the maintenance building?
Yeah.
Do you remember when?
Not until the next morning when Detective Jones came to my house and told me about it. I was like worried the night before and stuff.
Do you recall what other things the detectives might have said?
Never told us obviously tell the truth, but they never did accuse Dakota of doing it.
Speaking of Dakota, what was he doing at this time?
Dakota had made up some ridiculous story and telling it to detectives about where we were at the fire.
When you heard that, what did you do?
For the time being, I agreed with Dakota's version, but before I went home, I made sure I told Detective Jones the truth, and I was sorry for lying.
So after that story, what happened next?
After that, we got to see a picture of Sheldon Brown in his family.
And who is Sheldon Brown?
Sheldon Brown was a maintenance worker at my school, and Jones had told us that he died in the fire.
How did you react to that?
Dakota and I both got upset over the news.
Why were you upset?
The only reason I got upset is because I thought about how my life would be if I had lost my dad. You know, it's really strict, but obviously I wouldn't want to lose them.
And how did the detectives react to you?
The detectives told us we didn't have to be there anymore, so we left.
At this point, did you have any questions for the detectives?
Yeah, actually, I asked Detective
State in your testimony not only the fact that it was a lot of money, but also that the tipster would be a local hero, didn't you?
$20,000 is a lot of money, but $5 would still be a lot of money to me, so it's not really a big deal. And obviously, they'd be a local hero. I mean, this kind of stuff doesn't happen every day in Phillips, Ohio, so yeah.
Your Honor, at this time I would like to enter Exhibit D into the, please state that I am showing opposing counsel an unmarked copy. Would you like a copy?
Yes, please.
Permission to approach the bench.
You may.
Permission to approach the witness stand.
You may.
Completely irrelevant as to determining the custody of Dakota Allen or the coercion of Dakota's confession.
Response?
$20,000 is a pretty big thing that could convince a person whether or not a person was able to start a fire or not.
Though I agree with you, defense counsel, I don't believe that this witness would be an expert or able to give an opinion on whether or not she thought he was capable, so I'm going to sustain the objection.
Later on in the day at the police office, did you agree to testify in a trial at which Dakota could possibly be convicted?
Of course, yeah.
Though I'm sure you've read this document before, could you please follow along with me the third paragraph while I read? It is hereby notified the death of Sheldon Brown. No more questions, Your Honor. Oh, may I retrieve my...
You may. clear up the record, the ruling I'm going to make on the previous objection as to whether or not I would allow the question. Yeah, I'm going to allow the question, so I'll overrule that objection. And if you'd like to redirect, you may at this time.
Yes, sir. Quinn, on cross-examination, you were asked about the number of times you had seen that poster. Did you feel like you were under arrest?
No, not once.
Did the detectives accuse you of committing that arson?
No.
Did you believe you could terminate that interview?
As stated, you never thought you were in custody, correct?
Right.
Although as soon as you were placed in the police car, you got it straight out of the way that you did not do what you were in there. You did not set the arson, correct?
Well, obviously, I'm not going to be like, oh, hey, detectives, yeah, it was me. And then tell them the truth. That's what I'm there for.
No further questions.
You may step down. Ben.
Prosecution rests.
Very good. Defense, do you have any witnesses that you would like to present?
Yes, Your Honor.
2 psychiatry residents.
Dr. Martinez, have you ever been qualified as an expert witness before?
I have been qualified in over 30 cases as an expert witness.
What did these cases entail?
They were predominantly about juvenile defendants and figuring out whether their statements were coerced or freely given.
Your Honor, at this point, I would like to qualify the witness as an expert in forensic child psychiatry.
Any objections from the prosecution?
No objection, Your Honor.
Okay, testimony taken from this witness shall be that of an expert in child psychology, or psychiatry. Thank you.
Other well-developed reasoning skills.
How did Dakota react during your interview?
He was generally very cooperative during our interview.
What can you conclude from this?
Due to his lack of medication, or his lack of long-term problem solving, his reward-seeking tendencies, and his withdrawal from medication, he was very vulnerable during it. He is very vulnerable to interrogation for someone his age.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Cross?
Yes, Your Honor. Good morning, Dr. Martinez. My name is Casey, and I'll be asking you a few questions. You formed Johnson, Martinez, and Associates Clinic with several of your partners, correct?
Yes, several years ago, or a couple of years ago.
Okay. And at one time, you were chair of the Department of Psychiatry at the Buckeye University Medical College, correct?
As I stated in my direct, yes, I am.
Although you recently resigned as chair due to the demands of your private practice, correct?
Yes, because that is my first priority.
And you have testified for the defense in every case you were involved in, correct?
Well, I can't go against the people I'm trying to work for.
Is that a yes, you have testified for defense?
I work with children every day, and most of my cases have been predominantly juvenile defendants, so why would I testify
I'm sorry,
against
Dr.
the...
Martinez. I'm asking if you have testified for defense before it.
I've worked with the people I've been trying to work with since I started my practice, so yes, I have worked with defense.
And you were contacted by Dakota Allen's attorney and asked to perform an evaluation of Dakota, correct?
Yes, I was.
And you were also asked to provide testimony for Dakota, correct?
Yes.
And you agreed to evaluate and testify on Dakota's behalf without charging a fee, correct?
Yes.
In fact, you felt that the, quote, high-profile nature of the case would provide positive exposure for yourself and your practice, correct?
Yes.
Let's talk about some of your research as a practicing psychiatrist. It is true that there are areas in which an adolescent's cognitive development is similar to that of an adult's, correct?
They tend to show some development similar to adults, so
And adolescents can also show an increase in reasoning ability, correct?
yes, they should develop their reasoning.
Is more susceptible to police interrogation pressure, correct?
May you repeat the question?
You concluded that Dakota was more susceptible to police interrogation, correct?